All right, Shawn, we got the technical issues out of the way, and you can see how much help I was. You saw me doing everything. I stood by the door. I was actually leaning against the door, so that was really hard work while everyone else fixed it. But thanks for coming in, man. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So you're coming in from London, you said?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. You're a lawyer. I mean, there's this like connotation with lawyers, this, I don't know, good, bad, ugly.
Can't live with them, can't live without them, right?
Yeah. Oh man. But you didn't even, but you were saying earlier, there was no plan to be a lawyer. That wasn't the goal when you were in school?
Yeah. When I was first in university, one of my professors told me I should go to law school, and I told him no chance.
Oh, really?
I told him I was done with post-secondary education. My mindset was not in a place, certainly not where it is now, where, I understand that if you're not always learning, you're going backwards. So, but at the time, I was ready to move into a government career. I thought government was the way to go. And
really, I don't think a lot of people think that.
Well,
maybe just people I know. It doesn't like register at the top of the list for people.
No, I don't think it's the way to go for me, at least now. Government jobs are great. They pay well.
Yeah.
They've got great job security, a great pension. And if those are things you value, it's tremendous. But I came to learn as I grew into a mature adult that those were not things that were piquing my interest. So, but back to law school, I had no interest in going at all. And then I got into a law type job. I worked for the Canada Border Services Agency.
But you were customs off. Was it customs at the airport there?
Yeah, I started as an officer, a uniformed officer, a student officer at the Hamilton Airport. So I did that for a couple summers. And so I was in the primary inspection line, which is that first booth you talk to when you drive up at a border or arrive at an airport.
The person you lie to?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. For anyone listening, I'm joking. And especially if you're a CBSA, I'm joking. Yeah. Don't stop me. I'm going to get searched every single time I go through an airport now.
Yeah.
I'm finished.
You're red flagged.
Yeah.
So I started there, and then I applied to a job, like a regular job. I had no business getting this job, but passed the test, passed the interview, and I was hired. And it was basically being an immigration prosecutor. My job was to do two things primarily. One, represent the government, the Minister of Public Safety specifically, in bail hearings for detained persons under the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, and also to do immigration-type trials.
Where you're not a lawyer at this point.
No, this was a law job that did not require a law degree.
What did you take in university?
Criminology.
So you had some sort of idea of that? Like, it just seems, I had no idea. Like, you would just naturally think someone would need a law degree to do that type of stuff, right? Okay.
Yeah, you would think so. And on the defense side, on the other side, on the detainee side, or on the person who is accused of not being permitted to be in the country, you had to hire a lawyer or a paralegal or a special type of licensee called an immigration consultant. Still way more sort of certification than I had.
Yeah.
But, it's an administrative tribunal. The standard of proof was much lower. And so the legislation did not require me to have a law degree. So I get into that. I'm doing that. And about a year in to my career, I lost a case. A very dangerous dude got ordered released from detention. He did some really bad stuff. He hurt some people.
After he got released?
No, this is why he was in jail.
Okay, gotcha.
And we were trying to deport him to his home country, but we couldn't for various reasons. Anyways, he gets released, and the government has the right to seek what's called judicial review. So I started working with the Department of Justice lawyers on getting that decision overturned. And ultimately, we were successful in that. But what I came to learn was being a lawyer sounded pretty cool. I was working very closely with the DOJ lawyers. And so I got a little bit of interest, like, hey, I like what I'm doing. I believe in the mission. So why not go to law school and do what they're doing at a greater scale? So that's what I did. I applied to law school. I thought, I'm going to DOJ. This is going to be great. I get into law school, and one of the immigration judges one day pulls me into a courtroom. This is on lunch break. Shuts the door, sits me down. She says, I hear you got into law school. Congratulations. And I also hear you want to go to the Department of Justice. And I said, yeah. She said, you are not going to the DOJ. You're going to be in business. And you're going to go to Bay Street and be a corporate lawyer. And that's going to be way more fitting to your personality.
Why did she say that?
We worked every day with these judges.
Yeah.
And they were certainly impartial, but it's impossible not to develop some kind of interpersonal, professional working relationship with them.
Sure, because I guess you're not just seeing them in the hearing room or whatever. You're also seeing them outside and stuff.
Hallways. Yeah, that's right. So there was no impropriety, but at the same time, I would spend entire days, multiple days a week with the same person sometimes. And so in between cases, you chat a little bit and you learn. And so this particular judge, they're called members of the Immigration Division. This particular member thought highly enough of me to take the chance to tell me what she thought I should consider. And that was the first time I thought, I should maybe think about whether I actually want to go to the DOJ or whether this is just something that is easy. So I think about that, and this is actually where my real estate investing journey started. I go to law school. First week of law school is orientation, and they tell you about all the cool things you can do with a law degree, and that was the moment I decided I was done with the government. I was going to be some kind of private sector lawyer, and here we are. Is that almost 10 years later?
Huh.
Yeah.
And then, so this was how long after you were done university then? I guess almost 7-8 years, something like that?
4 years.
4 years.
Yeah. So I graduated 2011 and I started law school 2015.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a different path, I guess, than some people take.
Yeah. Most people go straight to law school out of university. I was one of very few. I'd say maybe 15% of my class had working experience. And I'll tell you, work experience and life experience made a huge difference in law school.
I believe it. I think because you have a better path, or maybe not better path, you've seen other things, so you feel more certain about the path that you're on or the decision you're making versus, I think with some post-secondary education, it's almost kind of like it's programmed. Like, oh, well, I wanted to be a lawyer, so I'm just going to go here. Now I'm going here. And when you don't get to experience what's out there, good or bad on both sides, then you're not sure until afterwards.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but university's not a trade school with a couple of very few exceptions. So, if you get an English degree or a philosophy degree or a sociology degree, you don't necessarily have like a job to just walk into. So sometimes law school is like, well, I don't have a job, so I better keep going on the education thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then how'd you get into it? Because you focus, I know you do lots of stuff, but you really started focusing on real estate investors.
Yeah.
That was that's just because you started investing? How did that come about?
Yeah, completely by accident. When I was applying to law school, I went on a surfing vacation with my buddy Ryan. And, we're talking about law school applications, where I'd applied, et cetera. I'd applied to a bunch of schools, and he said, well, hey, if you get into Windsor, you should buy a house because they're so cheap. I was like, I'm living in Toronto at the time. I'm early 20s. Buying a house is not on my radar at all.
And from Toronto to Windsor, it doesn't have the sex appeal, that's for sure.
No.
Of like, that's really what I want to do is I want to go to Windsor, right?
Well, shout out to Windsor because I actually miss Windsor. I had a great 4 years in Windsor, and I got a lot of good things to say about that town and the people there. Met a lot of great people, made a lot of good friends that I'm still friends with. But
for the record, I wasn't knocking Windsor, but I'm saying at that age to go from Toronto, because I know you have this at least you may have had this perception, because I know my friends when I started driving out to Hamilton, for example, and we started investing in Hamilton in my early 20s, and they said, what the heck, like, why are you going out to Hamilton? Because the people that don't know Hamilton, they drive along the QEW and they see the steel factories and they're just like, oh my God, like what is this place? They don't know any better, right?
That's right. So the day I get accepted to Windsor, I'm waitlisted at a couple other schools, and the deadline to accept Windsor or not comes, and I say, well, Windsor chose me, so I'm in. So I accept that offer. I'm into Windsor Law, and then I'm like, oh, I should buy a house. So I start looking. I find a place.
Don't even say the price. 20
minutes. It's a 20-minute walk. 5 bedrooms, huge backyard, 4-car driveway, $130,000.
Wow.
So what do I think? I think, okay.
And this is only 11 years ago, you said?
Yeah, this is 2015. 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I buy the place. I figure I'm going to rent the rooms out to other students.
Yeah, brilliant.
Oh God, I thought I was so smart. I had no idea what house hacking was. I had no idea what the BRRRR strategy was. None of it, right? I'm thinking, okay, I'm leaving a job. I've had a salary for 4 years. I have a certain lifestyle. I got to replace that. I got to find a way to live for free so I'm not dipping into the debt they hand you when you go to law school. So I do that. So I fill 3 of the rooms. I have my own room and I have an office. And all of a sudden I'm cash flowing. I'm like, yeah.
Off 3 rooms.
Yeah. Yeah, my mortgage payment was $526 a month. So I start cash flowing, which is so good because in law school, one of the most important things you need to get through it is beer money. And that's what it got me. So then I'm thinking, okay, this is pretty good. And I love school so much, I decide I'm going to add an MBA. So that sets me back a year. I do business school for a year, take a year off law school, do straight 10 months of business school. And we're in business, we're in finance 1, and we're learning about the assets of a corporation. And my finance professor tells me something that is totally contrary to everything I've ever known and believed in my life. And he said, cash is the least valuable asset of a corporation because all it does is lose its value on inflation every day.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm shocked that anyone spoke, like, you don't hear that very often.
No.
That's why I'm shocked. Okay.
I got taught to save as a kid, right? And that's a perfectly valuable thing to do. But what I realized was I was sitting on a whole bunch of debt, basically professional student line of credit debt that I wasn't using. I was like, well, it's kind of the same thing. So I thought, why don't I buy another house? But this time I'm going to learn my lesson. I'm going to buy way closer to school. I'm going to buy a bigger house. So I took that money and I bought another student rental, 5 bedrooms, 2 living rooms. It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to turn one of those into a bedroom.
Uh-oh.
What I did. So luckily the guy selling it was a real estate agent and an investor, owned a bunch of apartment buildings. Told him what I was doing. He let me show the house to prospective tenants before I even owned it. So I had the place full before I even got the keys. I remember being on the front porch with the tenants and their U-Haul outside, just waiting for my lawyer to call me that the deal had closed. Anyway, so we'll get them in, convert the living room, and now I've got 2 places cash flowing.
I thought you were going to say you got in trouble by converting that unit.
No.
No,
I might these days. Windsor's really cracking down on landlords.
Well, some people take it too far.
You're right.
That's the problem. And they like, because I walked into a place and it was in the basement, and the no word of a lie, what was separating one wall between 2 rooms, call them, was a sheet hanging. Yeah. And I'm just like, they take it too far. And then there's not safety because they don't have proper exits for people. So that's the type of stuff that just kind of ruins it for everyone.
Totally.
What I mean by ruins is all this regulation comes in. It becomes a big pain in the butt for everyone. But it's needed because there's a bunch of people that just look at it. They're like, oh, well, Shawn bought 2 properties and he's cash flowing. Well, you know what? I'm just going to go buy properties. And how cheap can I do it? Instead of treating it like a business, they just try to cut corners everywhere.
Yeah.
So it kind of gets, so I understand why they're doing it, even though I'm not a huge fan of it, but I understand that they got to weed out the people that just really aren't doing things properly. Right.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And when I was looking for that second place, I saw a ton of that, 5 or 6 single mattresses lined up on the ground in a basement.
Really?
Jeez.
But we've seen some of that stuff recently because of all the immigration that we've had come in, especially students, like people just outright taking advantage of them.
Yeah.
And even worse, you see some people's ads or you hear these recordings of people making the call and they're looking for people to stay there, but they're also looking to kind of have these quasi, sexual relationships with them in replace of rent or something like that. And I'm just like, this is what it's kind of like. It's just gross.
Yeah.
So, but then, so you had these 2 properties.
Yeah.
And then that was it. You had the bug from there, or?
Well, kind of. I started joining the Facebook groups of all the investors, and I start seeing that no one's really all that happy with their lawyer. I've since learned why, but I think, oh, that's interesting. I could pair my profession with my interests and maybe create some value that way. So, but at the same time, I'm on the Bay Street track. I ended up starting in Bay Street and was a Bay Street lawyer for a little bit. But what the turning point, the inflection point for me was my cousin, a realtor in London, says, hey, why don't you come down to this event that my brokerage is putting on and I think you'll really like it. So I go, and this is the first time I hear of the BRRRR strategy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, this is brilliant. You mean I can put money in and then take it out and use the same money to buy another place?
It was when someone put that acronym together, Tom and I always laugh because I'm like, well, obviously we didn't. I'm like, I did this strategy. Not I, like multiple, like many investors did that, but then it was called just like refinancing.
Right.
But then someone turned that acronym and that BRRRR acronym. I just laugh. I'm like, I think it was from Bigger Pockets.
Yeah, Brandon Turner did it.
Oh, that's where it came from for sure. I didn't know, and I'm like, it was smart because everyone's talking to us. When it was more popular at the time. They're like, hey, so do you guys do BRRRR? Ooh. And I'm like, well. Yeah, like you just kind of refinance. I'm like, why is it such a big deal? But I just didn't. When it was just amazing psychologically to me that when you put the acronym around it, how like it just kind of exploded in people's minds.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. So then I'm like, oh, this is brilliant. I can do this. I can do this with student rentals because I've already done it twice. Look at me, right? I thought it was so good.
But you were, and most people don't even take the initiative in anything.
Yeah, it's a fair point.
And there is a pain in the ass factor. Let's be honest. Like there is some stuff to do. You got to show the property. You got to rent it out, and there are some repairs that come up. I mean, typically, for me, our student properties are probably like just some of the most reliable, best long-term, best performing ones, managed properly. Because we've seen some people mismanage them, and they can go sideways on you. But you got to manage them properly.
Totally agree. I had my students were. I think I had one problem tenant the entire 4 years. 2. And one actually destroyed my personal house.
Oh, because they were living with you in that house?
Yeah. Yeah, I asked them to leave, relied on Section 5I of the Residential Tenancies Act. If you don't know what that is, look that up. Very important if you're in house hacking. There was some drama between him and another tenant who'd been there a long time who I really liked. I told this guy, listen, you got to go. Anyways, I was living in Toronto at the time. I'd moved to Toronto for the summer for work, and he destroyed the house. And
what does that mean, destroy the house?
Oh, he lit stuff on fire.
No.
He defecated in my vents. He took all of the food out of the fridge and freezer and put it down the vents. He urinated all over couches. What else did he do?
Really?
Oh, yeah. It was bad.
This is the worst student. I've never heard a story like this before.
This is not typical student stuff. This is someone with a serious mental health.
Was he a student though?
Yes.
Okay, because sometimes you get just adults looking for a room when they coming into. So I didn't know that.
But this turned out so good because I had gotten good insurance that covered issues with tenants, and so I got basically a fully renovated house the year before I was ready to sell in a rising market, and then I sued him for the difference that the insurance company wouldn't cover. And got another, I think, $5,000 out of him at small claims court. So it turned out awesome for me because my house value went way up. I wasn't living there, so I didn't have to deal with it. Just had to sort of arrange for the insurance company contractor to get in, and then sold the house for a big profit after that.
That's how you got. Now you got your stripes. Now you got your investor stripes.
Yeah.
So, man. So then you were on Bay Street for a while. So what's Bay Street like now? Like, but what good and bad Bay Street versus your private practice? I mean, I think different people are cut out for different things. Yeah. I know some people that type of deep in the city corporate environment, in boardrooms and stuff, like that's their thing. They love it. And some people are like, I can't stand that. I don't want to do one day of it. But I guess my guess would be it's more formal, less relationship driven, whereas the private side of it is more relationship driven, but I don't know.
It's a really good question. It's always relationship driven. It's just that the stakes are higher on Bay Street.
Okay.
So my first big deal I was in was a $40 million transaction. That's a crazy big size for someone coming, I grew up in a town of 700 people. Like that's big. As Bay Street goes, it's pretty small. If you work at any of the really big firms doing mining deals, those are $1 billion deals. But this is a big deal. It's still very relationship driven, but the work that goes into a $40 million deal is a lot different than the work that goes into a $1 million deal. Mm. So I really liked Bay Street, but there was one thing I could not get away from. I was someone else's, other people's time. The partners were leveraging my time to do well financially. And I understand that relationship, and there's some benefit to it, but there's a lot, it's a carrot and stick situation, and the stick's real long on Bay Street. You get brought along to this idea of becoming a partner, and partnership sounds great, except there's 2 tiers of partnership, and it's really decently easy to get into the first tier, but it's exceptionally difficult to get into the second, and you got to put in years and years and years, and just when you get there, then you have to invest several $100,000 or maybe several millions of dollars to get in. All of that works out for a lot of people, but for me, I knew that being someone else's other people's time just wasn't going to be for me.
When you have to invest that money, so is that basically are you getting a % ownership in the firm there? Or is that just a payout for those people that were in before you and they take that out before, like you put that in, they're able to take that out as a dividend or something, and then you're in after that?
It really depends on your firm's structure.
Okay.
But as I understand it, it's buy-in to be part of the club.
Got it.
And then there might be a distribution, or it might go to the bottom line. I'm not really sure. I never really reached that level.
Yeah, it depends on.
But it's generally a buy-in to become part of the club.
Huh.
Yeah.
All right. And then today now fast forward to today, you're dealing with all sorts of real estate stuff, lots of real estate investors. We're in this thriving hot market where things are flying off the shelves, and it's busier than ever, and you probably can't keep up. Yeah. But before we started, you were saying that, so for anyone listening, I'm joking. That's not the case. We all know that. But so you're seeing what's going on in the power sales. You're seeing an increase in those things?
Power sales everywhere.
Is this private? This is power sales from private lenders that are
and institutional.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I'm helping a guy now who started a project at the start of COVID, and it was a really good, seemingly good rather, project. It was a buy, sever, and build.
Okay.
It was a multifamily project out eastern Ontario with a bunch of land.
How eastern? Like you don't have to say this exact city, but was it like a a small population area
outside of Ottawa?
Okay. So relatively small area,
veteran
right?
Community to Ottawa.
Smaller population then?
Yeah, but not so far away from Ottawa that that it's definitely connected to Ottawa.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So buy, sever, build. His plan was to basically burr the existing apartment building, at the same time sever the lot and build a bigger one there. Great sounding project. But here we are 4 years later, and he's in power sale with an institutional lender, and it's a battle. The project did not go very well. The build was, they hit too many roadblocks. They didn't have enough money. So that kind of sputtered out. They got some units turned over, but the interest rates went up. They had a variable rate mortgage, so their interest rate went up, and all of a sudden now it's not cash flowing. So they're not able to make their property tax, their mortgage, their utility payments. So it's really going downhill. He's sold the building, but the closing is so far out that the power sale is probably going to complete before that sale. So our job is to fend off the power sale, which is working to the best it can. It's a real battle. The lender has hired a real shark of a lawyer, and fair enough. You want to get your money back as a lender, but it's a real battle out there for people.
Would the price point give them their money back if it's sold?
Mm-hmm.
I just don't understand. So what's the logic? Because it's like it typically the lender doesn't want to own the property; they just want their money back.
Yeah.
And if in the relatively near future that's going to happen, what's the incentive for them to keep pushing the power sale? Do they feel like there's more upside there for them or something?
No, it's not about upside. I've presented this precise argument to their lawyer. Like, why would you keep pushing on this? And they finally answered me and said they've seen scenarios like this enough times to know that not all of these purchases go through. So they want to take the steps now so that if this transaction doesn't close later,
they can get it right away.
They can go right away.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? Like, that's a legitimate position to take for a lender. So it was nice that it finally actually came out that that's what they were doing, because beforehand it didn't make any sense. We've got we've got 2 offers. We accepted one. Oh, now it's firm. Hold off. So we're working with the lender to try and get them to at least slow down, because as you probably know, the more they do, the more the cost goes up.
Yeah.
We're already riding the edge of, will there be enough money and trust to actually close?
Real estate investing isn't always easy, but it can be relatively simple. And that's where the Rockstar Inner Circle comes in. Look, there's a lot of real estate investing information out there these days. That's why it's so important to pick your sources wisely. And even though investing isn't always going to be the easiest process, it does not have to be super complicated. That's where tried, tested, and proven strategies like the ones that Rockstar members use come into play. Everything shared in the Inner Circle is built from firsthand, on the streets experience in the current market. It's all up to date, things that people are actually implementing today. In fact, the ongoing courses are delivered live, so they're always up to date with the absolute latest real life experiences. As a Rockstar member, get ongoing access to over 20 different systems and programs covering things like which properties investors like and why, our private rental system, what opportunities the investors are scooping up in student housing currently, the legal side of investing, why or how to use corporations as an investor, a mortgage class with the absolute latest options and programs to build your portfolio as an investor, because they're different than a regular home buyer. And there's a whole ton more in all those different classes. Of course, to implement all these strategies, members get access to unlimited private one-on-one coaching with an actual human experienced investor, not an AI chatbot, not ChatGPT or anything like that. It goes beyond training classes in real estate. It's a community for people looking to take control of their own finances, to give themselves options and allow them to live life on their terms. With ongoing live and virtual opportunities to connect, it's built for investors by investors. You can see everything members get at rockstarinnercircle.com/member. It's rockstarinnercircle.com/member. Now back to the show.
So the more cost that the lender incurs, the less likely it is that the deal closes.
I'm in a similar situation, not like that, but with a tenant, long-term tenant. I want to say about 8 years. Great people, trying to work with them, but to protect my downside, I've still had to go through the process of getting a hearing, and and I'm happy to do a long-term repayment plan. Like I'm being very flexible in the terms, and I don't want them to leave. I want everything to work out. But same thing, I'm like, no, I still have to go through this process. That's because if it doesn't work out, then I need to be able to take the next steps, especially because of the delays of the LTB right now. Although the delays have shortened. I think to get a hearing right now, what we're hearing, mine was about 3.5 months, which still isn't. I mean, like I'm saying that like it's a good thing, which is not. But compared to what it was, it's a
great
better
thing compared to what it was. But it's still it's still justice denied. 3.5 months for a non-paying tenant is simply too long.
Yeah, and people there's a lot of people that were just trying to, they're not dealing with these corporate landlords, and there's like all these funds behind them. There's some people like yourself,
you and me.
You were trying to get a student property, and you're like, hey, let's try to make this thing work.
Yep.
And if everyone stopped paying for a couple of months, and while you're in school, like, hey, it hurts. And there's a lot of people are feeling squeezed everywhere, whether it's the grocery store or interest rates, or carrying their mortgages or other loans.
Yeah.
And it hurts. It hurts everyone. There is the flip side of that too, whereas some people will look at any opportunity. Like there's just bad actors and everything. And that's what kind of messes it up, right? Because they'll look at any opportunity to try to kick someone out when they can, because they want to put someone else in and get absolute top dollar from that person any chance they can, anytime the market changes. So it's this kind of weird dynamic, but what were we going to say?
Yeah, it's tough. On one side, this is a business, but on the other side, we're dealing with human beings who have lived in place, like your tenant, who's lived in a place for a long time, and it doesn't necessarily deserve to be kicked out.
Yeah, and to be clear, they're paying well below market rent, and I'm aware of that. And I don't know, I it's been a win-win scenario for a long time. So I'm just like, hey, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Would it be nicer to have someone that's paying market rent? Yeah, of course that would be nicer. But would those people maybe damage the property more, or there'd be more turnover or headaches or whatever? Well, yeah, that might come with it too. And I'm happy to accept the trade-off.
Yeah, I know a guy in Kitchener who owns a ton of multifamily, and he purposely lists his units a couple $100 under market value. He's never vacant ever, and he always gets good tenants.
Yeah, and he's not trying to squeeze them for every last dollar. I find that too, and I guess some people will say, well, then you have an underperforming asset, and they're right. It is, but it's
one vacancy, and are you underperforming?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
How long it takes?
How long does it take to recover from 1 month of vacancy?
Yeah,
a long time.
Depending on the change in rent, it could be quite like if you're increasing it by $100, then it's a long time. Yeah. So, but then what else? The other thing that came up. So the power sales you're seeing, and you're seeing lender side. We've seen a number from the private lending side. Those have kind of the ones we're seeing kind of dried up for the most part.
Interesting.
Yeah, that we saw them early on, and then that book with the lender that we were working with there, they had a number of them come through, and then though their book's pretty solid now, and they haven't kind of had anything. I'd want to say for all of this year, kind of by last year, it was kind of done. So their underwriting, I guess, was just was fairly strong. You would imagine, or they got lucky. I don't know, but they're performing well still.
That's good. We are seeing on the lender side, we have a whole private lending department. So on the lending side, we are definitely seeing smaller lenders. I would say that there's a greater of those in power sale on the lender side. The greater proportion is private small lenders, people who don't have the same underwriting teams or expertise that, say, an institutional investor or a MIC might have. So these are people who invested their registered funds who are now in a real pickle because it takes money to get out of power sale. What's
the process? So if you lent to someone, what's the process now? So I've lent to you.
Yeah.
You're not paying me. I'm not happy.
Yeah.
We can use other people as an example. but so if I've lent to someone and I'm trying to now, they haven't paid me. I'm in second position, I guess. That's most typical. They're in second position. They could be first, but most typical with the smaller guys is second.
That's right. Yeah.
So I'm in second position. What's my process now?
Well, from a high level, you're going to send a demand letter, a notice of sale. There's some timelines that are built into the legislation that separate when these steps happen.
Notice of sale means what? I'm taking the property to sell it to get my money back?
Yeah, it's basically saying I'm going through this process, and unless you pay me out, this is what's going to happen.
Oh, okay.
Because it's not really a discretionary thing. Unless you have a legitimate defense, as in, I did make that mortgage payment, there really is no defense to a power sale action.
So interest rates went up and I lost my job is no defense?
No, a contract's a contract. Mm-hmm. The circumstances behind it don't really matter, or behind your failure to comply or failure to perform, I guess. But if you did make that mortgage payment and this is a case of a mistake or maybe a malicious lender, then that would be a legitimate defense. But otherwise, there really is no defense. So a statement of claims issued. The remedy that is sought is the judicial granting of power of sale. Once that power is granted, then the lender has to do a couple of things. First, they have to get the property appraised. I think you got to get a couple of appraisals to make sure that you find the average or find a good value for what it's worth, because in the end, the lender has a duty to do their best to get the most they can for the property. Once they've got the appraisal, then they interview and hire a real estate agent. That real estate agent lists the property as a power of sale property, and it shows up on the MLS just like any other deal, except the narrative would show that it's a power of sale. And if you're searching for power of sale, you'd be able to find it.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, then it's like someone comes in and makes an offer,
and that's it.
And that's it.
And then what happens to so when for me to get granted power of sale, I think that was the term you used, like to get granted that permission or that power, I'm going to so how long for what does it take for me to get granted that?
Doesn't take too much.
No.
That's something we do. We'll file a statement of claim and file for the specific remedy of power of sale.
And how long does that take typically?
Not very long.
Oh no, okay.
No, not very long. No, it's a matter of days or a week or two.
Got it. And then but can I do that right away? So if you don't pay on the first of the month, can I start that procedure on the second of the month?
No.
Okay.
No, there are statutory timelines that are built right in to give the borrower a chance to make you whole, right? So it depends on whether it's your primary residence or an investment property. I think it's 30 days for an investment property, 35 days. Right? You send the notice, and then you can't do anything for 35 days or 30 days. And but don't quote me on that legislation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then once the timeline ends, then you get to take the next steps.
Okay.
But the legislation builds in timelines to give the borrower a chance to redeem. And don't forget, the borrower always has the right of redemption, which means if the total amount outstanding is $150,000 and you're the lender and you've sold this building under power of sale and closing day is on Friday, and on Thursday the borrower shows up with $150,000, that original deal from the power of sale is off.
And then is there liability for because let's say None. So on the seller, there's no liability because if the buyers bought that as a family home, for example, then they're just out of a place to live and that's it?
Yep. Yeah, they get their deposit back. That's it.
Huh.
Yeah, it's built right into the contract.
Yeah.
The borrower has the right of redemption, and if they do, too bad. And you have to agree to that as a buyer.
And then what happens to the, how often does that happen? Have you ever seen that happen regular, like after it sells for people to come back and pay the amount? Do you know?
I haven't seen enough power sales to have even seen that.
Okay. It's got to be rare.
But at the same time, not at the last minute. Like, I've never had a project actually get through to the end of a power. We've always been able to find a solution. Like one guy, probably my top client, we fended off power sale for 11 months, which was wild. And that deal finally closed, paid everyone out. Everyone's happy. Lenders are happy. And it's a tremendous wealth building move for him and his partner. Yeah.
Oh, good for him. Glad it worked out.
Yeah.
What happens to the first mortgage holder in those types of scenarios? Are they're notified that all this is going on? As long as those payments are being made, they're oblivious to the whole thing?
No. When you issue, when power sale's happening, you have to send out notices to every lender on title. And so the first would get it. And typically, sophisticated first position lenders will have what's called a cross default clause, which says that if you default on any other mortgage on this title, then you default on this, which then puts the first in position to go power of sale, and the first will win every time.
Sure, yeah. So when you're saying if you default on anything, that means as the second mortgage holder are taking the responsibility of this property, you're then required to keep the payments up on the first, because if you don't...
You could, but in essence, when I say cross default, I mean the borrower. If the borrower defaults on the second, then by cross default, the borrower also defaults on the first.
Okay.
So at the second might want to start making the payments.
Yeah, to make sure.
Get the first to back off. But once a first knows that there's a power of sale, they would just take control because they have the most to lose.
Yeah. So, but then you don't, as the second mortgage holder, you don't even know if they're making those payments or not.
Nope.
So then you're
you can always go ask.
Yeah. So if it's with a bank, but they're not even going to tell you. Like if you went to the bank and I said, "Hey, is the payment on this mortgage number been made?" They're going to be like,
"No, probably not," unless there was a subordination and standstill agreement, which we see sophisticated first position lenders require when there is a second going in behind them. And it's basically an information sharing and priority ordering contract that says, if there's any issues, I, as the first position lender, get the first crack at it, and you don't get to enforce anything until I say you can.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm just trying to think, because then when you get a second, most people don't even tell the first. Right, so they don't even know. Often that doesn't even go into, so you just don't know. So when in a second, you're even a little bit less. You're most of the time you have a little bit less power than you would even like. Like even if you have the security against the property and things, because you're really beholden to the first mortgage holder as well. Especially I would imagine if it's a large institution like a big bank, they're going to be the ones that are most aggressive, saying get out of the way, we're taking over.
Totally.
Yeah.
Which brings us back to a point earlier. Strong underwriting matters when you're in second, especially when you're in second, because loan to value is going up and your ability to exit is constricted. Okay,
so then this brings me to another question, since we're talking about this type of stuff. These promissory notes that were all the rage for a little bit, amongst different places, I've seen them come back to really haunt some people, unfortunately. And there's been publicized stories about some things that have gone very poorly, where people were lending money through different, channels or mortgage brokers, and the money's kind of gone poof into thin air. Or I shouldn't say that, but it's misused, or the projects went poorly, or it's gone poof into into thin air.
Yeah.
There's those publicized ones. There's a lot of ones that, investors we've spoken to that aren't publicized. And I know some of those stories, which are never fun to listen to and hear as well. how did these promissory note things work? Because my understanding, because you were saying earlier, that there is a place for promissory notes, but I just don't understand that place, because why would I ever sign a promissory note without having, like, I'd rather put a second mortgage or something on a property because I feel at least I have some protection that way.
What I tell people is it's not my place to tell you whether a promissory note is a good idea or not. It is my job as a lawyer to explain to you what it means to lend money through a promissory note. And, going back to my time in business school, we were taught that interest rate and rate of return is a reflection of risk. So if you want a higher return, you take a higher risk. And generally we saw prom note money being lent out at a higher interest rate. But you got to understand the risk. You've got no security. The only thing you have is a lawsuit for breach of contract. That's all you have. What's really killed people was this false sense of security. I can't tell you, Nick, the number of times I have seen the clause right to register a mortgage on title to X property. That is the biggest false safety net I've ever seen in my time in this industry. That is not permitted.
Because if you don't have a mortgage document, you can't register a mortgage, right?
That's exactly right. There is two things you need at bare minimum. Number one, a draft charge, which in Ontario is a printout from our land registry office with all of the property details, who the borrower is, who the lender is, and some of the terms. And for that charge to be registered on title lawfully by a lawyer, only lawyers can register charges, without risking their license and their livelihood, another document needs to be produced called an acknowledgement and direction. And if you've done a deal in Ontario, you've signed one of these before. And it says, I, the borrower, give you the right to register this charge on title to my property. I'm acknowledging you're doing it, and I'm directing you to do so. Without those two things, a lawyer risks their license registering a charge on title. So anytime someone has a prom note that says you have the right to register, unless it's accompanied by that draft charge and that acknowledgement and direction, it's worth nothing.
So what do you think? Like, where do you think, and I know this is just opinion, and I'm sure you don't know, but like, did someone just start using these things because they got a sample off the internet somewhere, and it was like a US based form, which is often happens, and we've seen that happen before too? Or is it just, so it's a little bit negligence, or is it just outright like, they were kind of trying to pull the wool over people's eyes too? I know it'll depend, not all cases being equal, but I'm just like, if that clause is so just like, no, that just doesn't work, where does it come from? More
or less, well, first of all, it's a very U.S. thing. In the U.S., the rules are completely different. Yeah. You can register liens. We can't, liens, we'll leave liens for a second, but you can't just register a lien in Ontario. Or I think anywhere in the country, other than maybe Quebec, which is a whole other world.
Okay, I want to circle back to that because I thought you could, but
Okay, so we'll talk about liens in a second. But you can do that in the States. So the idea that you can just register a lien on a property is very U.S.-centric. So I actually think that the people that give these promissory notes believe this to be true. I don't think they know it's not true. Most of the time that I have seen it go bad has not been a fraud type situation. I have seen the fraud, but then again, I think it is more the perpetrator, even they didn't know that that's not possible. In fact, some lawyers don't know.
Got it. Okay.
I've had to call up lawyers who have registered charges to say, show me your acknowledgement and direction, or you better take that off.
That seems surprising to me.
Well,
I guess every industry.
It's
just you like, and I mean every industry, there's good and bad in every industry. You just naturally like, you think, oh, the guy's a lawyer. Like for that type of thing, for the law, you just hold them to a higher standard automatically. So that's surprising to me. And then people chase, like we were talking about, it's just the returns. Like, even if they sound a bit unrealistic, people will chase those types of returns and sometimes really overlook the risk involved because, and maybe they've been referred by a friend that was getting those returns for a period of time or whatever. And we've seen a lot of people just be like, one guy said it the best to me. And, unfortunately he lost multiple six figures, on this type of stuff. And maybe he ends up recouping some of it or not. But right now that money's gone. And he's like, I got greedy. that was what he said his perception was. He's like, yeah, I dipped my toe in the water. It was going well. Put more money in. I just got greedy. I got blinded by by the returns. And he's like, that's it.
I've seen multiple people with 20% annual interest rate prom notes. That's juicy if it's true, right? If it works.
If it's true. But
so
I mean, to me, that's like a red flag right away, because there's very few things that you can afford to pay 20% on, and it's a real business opportunity for someone, especially over a even medium period of time, maybe for a little short run.
Yeah.
But we got pitched some certain things here early on by one of these mortgage corporations. Actually, recently they were just found guilty of fraud. So that corporation there, I don't know if you saw that. That was last week.
Yeah.
So and that organization had different people coming in pitching their products, and they came in here, and we found out, they're like, oh, we can do this, and here's how much you'll make. Here's your fee, and we get our fee, and it's all guaranteed, and here's the cash. Like, even though it's guaranteed. On development, yeah, I know. That's exactly what we said. As soon as someone in real estate said it was guaranteed, I was like, oh my god, I'm done. But the numbers just didn't make sense. Yeah, I was just like, so the returns were so good, and there was so much money floating around everywhere. I'm like, it just doesn't make sense. Like I can't make it make sense in my head.
Yeah. Well, this particular guy was doing burrs and flips. And so, I think you can probably make 20% work for 2-3 months.
Yeah.
Right. Especially if you've raised enough capital to cover the debt service, which is a dangerous game.
But that's common.
Oh yeah. Yes, it is very common to borrow more than you need so that you have enough to cover the debt service. But to make that work, your project must be a banger. Like, it has to be good. Otherwise, look what happens. We are how many billions of dollars evaporated in the last 2 years?
Yeah, because it's easy to do that type of stuff when the market's just going straight up, especially when it's at certain times. Yeah. I mean, it was appreciating. Who are we talking to today? Someone else that was coming in here. So another person that was involved in some pre-construction things earlier. And we were laughing about from December 21 to January 22, because I think they had sold like 350 units or something in a month. And I'm like, oh yeah, during that month, that was like the peak, because we came back from Christmas holidays, and we're like, did properties go up like $75,000 in the last month? It was just outrageous. Yeah. And then it covers up all these mistakes when things that's happening.
Yeah, totally. And but what's happened since? Markets have gone down, interest rates have gone up, I guess other way around. But that individual now is in deep trouble, because there's millions of dollars outstanding, and there's no equity in those projects. Yeah. So,
but I get it. The short term. So in the short term, you can make those numbers work.
But he was at super scale though. He was doing tons of projects. So, that might work, doing a couple here and there, even 2 flips a month. That's still a lot, but this guy was doing serious business.
But we were printing so much money. We were inflating things so much at the end. That's the last few years. Yeah. And then prior to that, we were doing the same thing, just not at the same pace, but we hadn't had this necessary correction that we needed for so long. People just forgot what a normal real estate market was like. Because now we're seeing people list their properties. They're like, no, it's sold. But it took 6 weeks. I'm like, well, yeah, that's like a normal market.
Average.
Yeah, normal market's like 2 to 3 months, really. Like that's kind of how things turn over. Like, but around here, we haven't seen this like a really long, sustained, balanced market for so long that it's like finally happening. And I'm not saying there's segments of the market I'm not saying are balanced. They're in more trouble than others. Yeah. Different areas, different product type. But it's it really skewed basically everyone's view on everything. We had other people that were coming in saying they bought a couple pre-construction condos and they were closing. They're like, hey, now what do I do? And stuff. I'm like, okay. I'm like, let's try to figure something out. But I'm like, hey, why'd you buy these? Like, what was the intent in the first place? I don't know. There's just, what happened was the real estate prices were moving and we felt like we didn't have enough. So we just walked into our sales office and we bought 2. And I was like, whoa, that was like probably not the most well thought out plan,
Well, it wasn't thought out at all.
So yeah. So it's like, and now they're just dealing with it, but that's just FOMO. Yeah. So many people got FOMO, and it's just like the promissory notes. People see other people making money off it. They're like, oh, okay, I'll just jump into this one. And maybe some of them were good. Maybe they weren't. I don't know. And, I don't want to come back to liens too, but you said something earlier. I was blown away the first time that I found out that, and these were some of these larger offerings, that because I couldn't understand the cash flow component on development projects. I'm like, well, it doesn't make any money while they're developing the project. I don't understand the cash flow. And that's when someone explained to me, they're like, yeah, they overcapitalize and they use your own money to pay you back.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that before when people were first offering us these things. And I was like, what? I blew my mind. I'm like, that's what they're doing?
Yeah, it's like 100+% loan to value in essence.
Yeah. It's so like when I found out, I'm like, oh my gosh, I knew something didn't make sense. That's like an obvious one.
Yeah. Well, in the end, the cost of debt is always going to be lower than the cost of equity. So it made sense especially when interest rates were in the basement.
Yeah.
To overborrow and use the extra debt to pay the debt service. And now you're out of pocket even less. Your cash on cash return on the Excel spreadsheet
explodes. Yeah.
Crazy. And then you can go to your investor and be like, look.
Yeah. On the Excel spreadsheet. Yeah. Okay. So bring this back to liens.
Okay.
So you can't put a lien on someone's property. I need direction from them because what if I did work on their home? So if I did a $10,000.
Yeah. Okay. Lien rights arise out of statute and contract in Ontario. There are only a few types of liens. Now we should actually back up. A lien, from a real general high level sense, is any sort of impingement on title, right? It's any sort of like you owe me or I owe you on title.
And you can't sell the property until that lien is taken care of, right? Like, don't they have to notify the lien holder?
Yeah, unless the buyer agrees to accept it.
Okay.
So a mortgage is a lien because it impacts title. You can't sell that without paying the mortgage. So a mortgage is a type of lien. But the word lien, as it's specifically used in Ontario, refers to a very specific thing. And lien rights arise out of statute and contract and common law to an extent. So there are only a few types of liens. What you were referring to is a construction lien. And that lien right arises out of the Construction Act. So it's a product of statute.
Provided that I have a contract with the other party that says I was to do this work and I'm able to do it. Mm-hmm. But if I do it on a handshake, then I probably can't do it.
No, if you've got enough evidence to show that you can meet the requirements of the Construction Act. So it used to be the Construction Lien Act, and then it got all revamped. Actually, when I was in law school, one of the people working on the project to revamp the Construction Act was my construction professor, which was very cool. So I got to learn about the inner workings of revamping legislation for all you law nerds out there. The Construction Act, for better or worse, has a scheme in there to deal with prompt payment. And there's a whole way of going about it. And we don't need to get into it. But if you get all the way to the end and you're still owed money, you can register a construction lien on title. And that secures payment for the supply of labor and materials on that property. You have to actually put the lien on title, and you have to issue a statement of claim to get it perfected. Otherwise, the legislation says after, I think, 60 days, you don't have any rights anymore. So that is a statute-driven lien right. There's another one, Mechanics, Storage and something Lien Act. Anyways, if you store property or you're a car mechanic, you can place a lien on the stuff in the storage facility or on the vehicle itself. Solicitors have lien rights. So if a lawyer does a bunch of work for you and you don't pay them, then they can have
magically the solicitors got their own lien rights in there. Eh? I wonder how that happened.
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah. But that's it. If you're doing a project and I lend you $100,000 on a prom note, I don't have a lien right. There is no statute that permits that. And the type of lien that you could place on, or I could place on, is a mortgage, a charge on title. But as we talked about before, that's a right of contract, but there are other things getting in the way, like the Land Registry Office and the rules and the Land Titles Act that says that I, as a lawyer, can only register that charge if I get that acknowledgement and direction signed, and with independent legal advice. So when we have someone come to us that wants to lend prom note money, we walk them through. Do you understand what that means? And by the way, do you want the right to register? No problem. Let's actually give you that right. And the borrower's 99% of the time happy to comply because they have every intent of paying that back. And it just seems right that if you don't pay it back, you should get a mortgage.
Sure, totally.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So in a general sense, that makes sense. The risk there to the prominent borrower is if it takes 6 months for a default to happen, how many more mortgages got registered before you?
Oh, got it. Because if there's multiple prom notes, then everyone can register on it.
Yeah, and we've run into this situation before. A mortgage broker I know started to see some success. He and his wife invested 300 G's into a prom note with a guy who's now before the courts, and they lost a lot.
Yeah.
And that guy had multiple people register charges. In fact, I mentioned earlier I had to call a lawyer to be like, hey, where show me your acknowledgement direction. It was that case. And that mortgage had actually 2 had to come off title, and mine got to go in their place.
So you got higher on the list essentially.
That's right. Because we went and got the borrower to sign an acknowledgement direction. We call them A&Ds. We got him to sign an A&D, and as soon as he signed it, we registered.
Yeah, I hate thinking about all those scenarios, but it's good. Like, you have to, whenever you do that type of stuff, and you get people's true intent, because if you're taking any contract to the lawyer to get reviewed, if the person that is giving you that contract or that you're making that contract with starts freaking out and be like, well, no, why do you need that? Like, that's the sign right away. They're like, well, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. And then you just get all your, you get both sides of the equation presented to you from the lawyer. There was a situation with someone in our family was going to lend some money to someone, and they got really kind of antsy about it when the lawyer was getting involved to just kind of formalize everything.
Yeah.
And it was just like the biggest red flag ever. You're like, well, why? Yeah. Like you said, like this person was happy to say, yeah, okay, you're going to register the mortgage, no problem. Like they have fully intent to pay it back. They're not worried about it. So I guess the flip side is you register a mortgage against a property. There's no equity in that property, and you're out of luck anyways.
Yeah, what's the worth then?
But the exchange is you're willing to, as long as you're going into eyes wide open, you're willing to take that risk for the elevated interest rate, like you said, the risk and reward, right? Yeah. So you're getting a higher reward for the elevated risk, and then you decide to do it from there.
That's exactly it. If you're going to do it, that's fine. That's your choice. Mm-hmm. But I'm here to make sure you know the risks and rewards. And as long as if you can repeat them back to me and show me that you fully understand, have at it.
You do a lot of stuff with joint ventures too?
Tons. Well, I mean, in 21 and 22, it was how quick can you get me into this joint venture, and now it's how quick can you get me out.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about that, because my thought process on joint ventures is always put as much down on paper. 2 things. One is like, don't meet some random person at some meetup and be like, oh, I'm going to get in a joint venture with this person. Because to me, that's a business partnership, and there's going to be hiccups, and you got to figure out, can you work with that? Like actually work with that person.
Yeah. And
then it's like, put everything down on paper that you can think of. The ones that we've had, it's like, there's all these like scenarios that I didn't think of that the lawyers thought of, like, what about this? What about this? And you put it all down on paper. But then to get out of, if you have that ahead of time, it's getting out a problem.
No.
Oh, okay. Okay, because that's what I'm saying. So get out of. So
no.
the ones that people are trying to get out of now, they didn't have it initially?
Or don't have a clear exit plan clear exit option. Now, exit options are a double-edged sword. On one hand, if you make it too easy, then anyone can get out at any time. And especially, I mostly represent active parties in a joint venture. That's a problem for an active party because they don't have the cash, typically. So they are relying on 2 to 3 to 5 years of cash flow and appreciation and mortgage pay down to make the venture worth it. But if their money partner pulls the plug 3 months in, they've done a ton of work, and property is not going to sell for a profit. No, it's certainly not enough.
Yeah, and plus you have costs to acquire and to get rid of it too, right?
Right. So that's the one side of the sword. But on the other, if something does happen, there needs to be some way to economically and efficiently bring this to a close. So where it gets tricky is how to define when the exit should be easy. And that's where interpretation starts to come in, because we usually set some form of qualifier like a material disagreement. Well, what is that? Could be anything. right? So that's that. You generally, really good drafting is exactly how you said it. You dream up everything that could go wrong, and then you have a roadmap to the end of how to deal with that particular issue.
So what's a typical scenario that if I've been in a joint venture, let's say the plan was to own the property for 5 years, I've lost my job after a year, been unemployed for a little bit now, and I've used some savings, and I'm like, man, like I'm starting to get tight here. Like that money that I have in there, it'd be like really helpful in my life to get that money. How would typically, if you were advising either party, like is there something that I would put in to try to protect myself as the money partner there, that we would be able to do something? I know we might not make some money. I know there could be a loss. Like I don't know, I don't understand where.
If I'm on for the money partner, I'm trying to get in as many exits out as I can.
Okay.
Because I have leverage. Typically, I'm the one on title. It's my money in there. So if I'm representing that party, I want as many options as I can get. If I'm on the active party side, it's the opposite. I'm trying to close them, because very rarely will the active partner want out. Very, very rare, because their effort is front loaded and the return is back loaded. So they need to be in it for 3-5 years to really reap the reward, because all of that work, especially if it's a BRRRR, all of that work goes in on the front end. If you're the money partner, and I should actually say, I've only ever seen that type of scenario, like something I'd call a humanitarian type issue, come up maybe twice.
And that one maybe is not a good example because it changes the equation a bit, I'd imagine.
Well, yeah, because then this isn't a business disagreement. This is real life.
Yeah.
And the active partner is much more likely to be amenable to that, because in the end, your reputation is everything as an active partner in real estate. And if you're holding your money partner to the terms of a contract when they've had a significant life change, you're going to run out of willing money partners pretty quickly. So you'd be better off letting them out. And I would actually counsel them to do that. Yeah, sure, you got a contract, but is this one contract worth the fallout that might come if this goes public?
Got it. And then what cases do you see where people are trying to kind of get out that aren't humanitarian, like the business disagreement, like they just, like any business partnership, like people are like, okay, look, this guy's driving me nuts. It's time for us to kind of go our separate ways.
Yeah, I've seen that a bunch. And it always comes down to one of two things. Either mismanaged expectations or misalignment on what was supposed to happen. So it's real easy to talk about cash flow and how profitable we're going to be and the vacations we're going to go on, right? All of that stuff's so fun and so easy to talk about. But talking to a money partner to say, hey, listen, you could actually lose every cent that you invest in this. That's a difficult conversation. Saying, hey, we expect construction to cost $100,000. And when it comes in at $200,000, that sucks. That's a difficult conversation to have with a money partner, especially if you're about to do a $100,000 cash call. So what I see is typically an unwillingness of the active partner to have those conversations early before things go wrong.
Got it.
And then once they do go wrong, we have a money partner with an expectation that this was going to go a certain way, and now it's going the complete opposite. And then they start to butt heads. Mismanaged expectations as well. Kind of along the same line, but I like to tell my active partners, prepare for the worst. Like, tell your partner this is probably not going to go perfectly. You have to tell them that.
It makes things easier in the long run.
So much easier. And then plan for it in the contract. Plan for it. It's not that hard. And another thing I tell people is a good contract is the cheapest insurance you will ever buy. Because when something goes wrong, and it does, have you ever heard of a real estate project go perfectly?
I don't think it exists. Yeah.
Never. Nothing goes perfectly. Something will go wrong, and that's okay, right? As real estate investors, we have to learn, adapt, and then plan in the future on future projects. We take what we learn and we apply it. But you need in your contract, first of all, you need a contract, because when things go wrong, you need to be able to rely on the terms you've already agreed to. And if you've coached your money partner appropriately to expect it to go wrong, then when it does go wrong, they're not dealing with the same level of shock and anger.
Yeah, the emotion. You got to remove
That's
the
right.
emotion from
That's
it.
exactly right. And so this is a real coaching process with especially newer active partners. If you're just, if this is your first JV, like that, those are the longest conversations for me to really coach them into like understanding how to go about this, because you need to be a good steward of this person's money. I don't care if you're my client or not. Like, you have to be a good steward of other people's money. That is a principle that should be followed in this industry.
It follows your name. It protects.
Right.
It protects your business reputation for the long term. That stuff will follow you.
Yep.
And as big as the world is, I find it's also small as well.
Very small.
And, that's like one of those principles our dad taught us when we were very young.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when you give your word to someone or something, you keep your word. And he kind of promoted that with a little bit of physical violence on us, just to make sure that we did it. Because if we didn't, we know we were in for it a little bit, not in a bad way.
Yeah,
but we had a very good childhood. Nothing like that was happening in our house. But he did give us a little knock here and there. And I knew that if I said I was going to do something and I didn't, I'll never forget one time I was sleeping on the couch. I was probably a teenager, came home from my squad and I passed out, and I said I was going to cut the grass, and he got home from work and he was standing over me as I woke up, looked up, and he said something about the grass not being cut, and I jumped up and I ran outside to cut the grass just because I knew I said I was going to do it. And he's like, "Hey, you said you were going to cut the grass and you didn't," and he's just staring at me. I'm like, "Oh shit, I better get over there." So
that's funny.
But yeah, it matters. That stuff matters.
It's also the right thing to do. Be a good steward of other people's money. They've worked hard to earn that money. And now they're trusting you to take it and to make more of it. So that's
because it's going to lose its value, like your professor told you.
That's right. So that's an important role. But equally important is to under-promise and over-deliver. Don't promise the perfect return. Yeah. Don't promise crazy returns. Under-promise. Manage those expectations early. If you can tell a person, hey, I think conservatively we're in the 10% range on this, as a return on investment. That's pretty good. That's especially good these days. Especially
when it was popular and the interest rates were low.
Yeah, that's real good. Yeah, and when you deliver 25, you got a client for life.
Yeah, 100%.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, we learned at one point, I forget when, it was when we were helping investors buy properties, and just in the agreement of purchase and sale that we would put in, if the seller was supposed to do something, we learned that not to just say, okay, they agreed to do this before closing. It was agreed to do this before closing, and then here's what happens if they don't do it. Because it was because the lawyer at that time, I forget, we've worked with a number of different lawyers, but I forget which one actually told us this, but was just like, hey guys, this makes my life so much easier on closing, because then we know maybe we hold back $10,000 and we're going to use that for the work, or maybe this is, and we've learned too on the negotiation on the front end, because people have the intent to do it, just like the promissory note thing you said. Everyone's like, yeah, no problem. If I don't do that, that's fair. That's the fair amount. So we put the dollar value in, or whatever the consequences would be. And it's like never a deal breaker, never an issue. That's right. And it just makes things so clear on the back end, because everyone knows here's what happens.
It's so simple. It's betting on the outcome, in essence, where each party gets to control the outcome.
Yeah. And when you bring it up, to your point about bringing it up front, it's so easy to agree on terms when it's up front, when there's not a problem, because there's not the emotion involved.
That's right. That's
so
exactly
it just makes such a difference.
Yeah. So that contract, whether it's an APS or a JV or a shareholders agreement or a limited partnership agreement, or you're investing in a private issuance, a good contract is the cheapest insurance you will ever buy, because litigation costs tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. I had a guy who was, his money partner was trying to sell 2 properties for a $400,000 loss each.
For a $400,000 loss?
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
He just wanted out that bad?
Yeah.
Wow.
And wanted my guy to cover half.
Yeah, that would be a problem.
Big problem.
Yeah.
So we took some negotiation, but we ended up getting the money partner to pay my guy to leave. So instead of my guy being into it for several $100,000, I think he got a $50,000 check to walk away.
Yeah, that's a much better outcome.
Much better. And that conversation was not, here are your options. It was more about like, you're building something big, so where do you want your brain power going? Mm-hmm. Is it this several $100,000 project that is going bad with a not so great partner, or is it the several $1,000,000 things that you're working on this end? And that made the call very clear.
Yeah, it just makes it clear, like when I don't think there's a lot of lawyers like you that focus specifically on like real estate investors. And what I mean by that is not the corporate side of real estate investors. And I don't really mean like mom and pop either, but I just mean like the average person looking to do some of these between joint ventures and the promissory notes and the stuff that's a little bit more, that's regular in some real estate circles that isn't like on the Bay Street side of things. I'm sure there are others. I just don't know a ton of them. So I think it's kind of cool that you've seen all these different circumstances, because the experience that you see there, you can apply it to so many different ways and help the beginner person coming in and do that type of stuff. I find from speaking with people, I think sometimes lawyers are undervalued in a way because they're not viewed as an insurance policy. They're just viewed as simply as an expense. So I'd imagine you probably there's like a penny pinching aspect of things that you have to deal with as a lawyer too, because people either like shop you around or they just try to circumvent you altogether, and they find they'll use the template someone else gives them, like, hey, my lawyer gave me this JV agreement, just use this one.
Right.
But you don't know if it actually applies to your specific situation for what you're doing.
Every word in a contract matters. Every word is there specifically for a purpose. It's hard to imagine that, especially as the contracts get into 10, 20, 50, 100 pages. But every word matters. If there's a dispute and it goes to court, a judge is going to read every word. There's a case we learned about in law school. I forget the name of it. $1 million rode on the placement of a comma.
No, really?
A comma.
Wow. Because that was to try to prove the intent of
Gotcha. Yeah. So if the judge ruled that the phrase meant one thing, someone lost $1 million. And if it meant something else, someone gained $1 million. That's crazy. A comma. Every word in a contract matters. So, precedents, AI, ChatGPT, great tools, great starting points. But I'll tell you this, every word matters. And if ChatGPT makes a mistake, you don't have an insurance policy to go after.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that. But to your point about the contract, the first time our rent-to-own contract that we had done here went to court. One of our tenants, the first time we knew about it through any investors, one of our tenants, to say he changed his mind. He actually ended up getting a new girlfriend. She didn't like the place, and all of a sudden he didn't like the place anymore. And we went to small claims court because I forget what the amount was for that he wanted back. And the judge went through the contract. He asked the guy, in a nice way, not being a smart ass, but he had, this was I guess there's like a pre-hearing or something. It wasn't
settlement conference.
Yeah. But you still there was like on two sides of the room, and the judge,
deputy judge.
Yeah. Okay. So he asked the guy, he's like, look, do you speak English? He's like, yeah. Do you understand English? He's like, yes. He goes, is this your signature? The guy said, yes. He goes, well, let me just tell you, I would strongly recommend you not proceeding with this claim or whatever it was. And then we had counterclaimed because that's just what you do at that time. Yeah. And then the judge is like, if he doesn't proceed, will you drop that? And we're like, yeah, sure. And that was it. But to your point about the good contract, like it wasn't something that we get out of a book or some US based course. So we're like, okay, let's use this. We had a proper lawyer draft a proper agreement for Ontario for what we were doing. Yeah. And it saved us. Yeah, 100%. It saved us. And to be fair, that agreement's been used now a lot of times, right? But it was worth it. For people to reach out to you. And, I want to ask you about AI before. Yeah. So you're getting a lot of that. Like, what do you think about what AI is doing to the legal industry? Because a lot of, I look at some things like the very transactional stuff, not so much the JVs and the agreements and that type of stuff, but like closing a property, where it's it feels like very template. And I'm sure I'm missing some stuff because there's different things, but a more traditional transaction, is there some talk in the circles that these types of language models can kind of really do a lot of that work, and it kind of devalues some of that work for the more cookie cutter stuff that you guys do sometimes? Yeah,
this is a great question. AI is such a great tool, and we don't really know the boundaries, if there are any. I think that AI is going to make good lawyers better, and it is going to put bad lawyers out of business. Not necessarily because I think that they will replace, say in a real estate transaction, a residential real estate lawyer. In the end, the government and the Law Society control how title and mortgages work in this province. And until they give that power to artificial intelligence, which seems...
Well, they'll fight tooth and nail for that.
That seems so unlikely. I don't see AI replacing that particular function. I would be more worried about blockchain than I would about AI in that space, because blockchain transactions sort of take away a lot of the risk in a transaction because everything is traceable. And so I'd be more concerned about, not that I'd be concerned, because I think you would still need a lawyer for a transfer and a charge in terms of my own self-preservation. But back to the bigger point, I think AI is going to make good lawyers really good. The knowledge economy is kind of done, right? You can understand anything in a tenth of a second now by putting in a good prompt into ChatGPT. And that's awesome. What it means now is those contracts that we're talking about, we could run them through ChatGPT and ask it for 20 things I missed. And when it spits out 20 things, then we go and draft and put those things in. And now that contract's killer.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing. We have an investor we work with that's a doctor, has a few clinics, and he says there before a lot of the things they're doing, they're taking what their diagnosis is or the imaging charts things, they're doing theirs, then they're using AI to get another perspective to see, to either check their work or to think about something else, and then they're delivering it to the patient.
Yeah,
and that's how they're doing it, and they're like, it's been very effective for us that way.
That's the people who will fail when it comes to AI are the people who have too big of an ego to understand that it will know more than any human possibly could, and it will know it so much better. So it's more of like a supercharged assistant and fact checker to an extent and work checker than it is a replacement. And like I said earlier, when you hire a lawyer, you get two things. You get expertise and you get errors and omissions insurance. And you only get partially one of those things when you work with AI. So it's better to pair the two. Yeah,
that makes sense. The other school, and we're going a bit long, so I'll end it here. But the other thing that always comes to mind for me is schooling, and I don't think it would impact lawyers as much because it's so much of what's done, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's all like, legal precedents and here's past cases and things like that, and the laws aren't changing very fast, whereas in some other industries, so like the medical field's a good example, is there's so much stuff moving so fast in the medical field, by the time it gets to schools, it's outdated.
It's already changed.
Yeah. So, but I don't think it impacts lawyers as much for a law degree, at least in the way I'm thinking about it.
Well, to really make use of AI in the legal space, you have to know what prompt to put in. So you have to know when it comes to contracts, let's say there's three things that make up a valid contract: offer, acceptance, consideration. If you don't know those three things, how do you prompt ChatGPT to give you a good answer?
Got it. Yeah.
How do you know what an offer, like there's a whole day in contracts law on what offers mean, and there are 5 or 6 different cases that set out the boundaries of what an offer is. Okay, great. ChatGPT will know all of that. It'll know the cases. It'll probably make up a few cases as well because it likes to do that. I don't know if you've seen this in the news, but there are tons of lawyers getting disbarred or disciplined for submitting case briefs to court to judges with fake cases.
Oh, I did see one of those.
Yeah, there's a couple in BC. There's a bunch all over the U.S.
Like you said, it'll weed out the bad ones.
That's right.
Yeah.
It will. But the ones that use it, and then check those cases, they make sure they're legitimate, and then find the good ones and cut out the ones that are not so good. That turns your legal research from 8 hours into 10 minutes. Yeah,
it's a conversation we've had around here where people will be using it. I'm like, guys, we can't just put out data that it's spitting out. You get the source.
Yes.
And then go check that data, and then same type of thing.
Yeah,
and I guess more people go down that path, but I think early on people just think it's the be all and end all.
Oh, I see a ton of copy. I'm sure you do too. Ton of copy paste from ChatGPT.
Oh gosh, and you can tell. You can just tell in the tone. It's just like, okay, this is too much filler words and things like that.
Yeah.
If people want to reach out to you, is it email, phone number, social? Like what's the best way to kind of reach out to you?
I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook at SP Quigg on Instagram, Shawn Quigg on Facebook. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. You can also send me an email, sean@cardinallaw.ca. That's a really good way to reach me as well. Let's have a chat.
Yeah, I mean, it's been great. I mean, we haven't, we've crossed paths a few times chatting with you. You obviously know your stuff, and it's just, it's nice to kind of talk to someone that's kind of in the it feels like from your stories, you know, you're kind of in the trenches a bit, and because you were an investor as well,
Still am.
yeah, and it gives you a different context, right? So yeah, it's been cool, man. I really appreciate you coming in and doing this.
Thanks for having me.